The fluorescent lights of the conference room hummed, a cold, indifferent sound. Across the polished mahogany sat Marcus Thorne, his smile a predator's. "It's simple, Elias," he purred, flanked by his 2 lieutenants. "Project Chimera's core data, a small transfer to our department. We all rise together." I kept my hands flat on the table, refusing to let them tremble. "My loyalty is to Stratagem Defense, Marcus, not to your personal kingdom." His smile vanished, replaced by something chilling. "Loyalty? That's a funny word, coming from a man who's about to have nothing. You're either with us or you're a loose end. And we," he leaned forward, his voice a whisper, "always tie up our loose ends." Thorne's threat wasn't a future possibility. It was a promise being fulfilled in real time. I walked back to my workstation, the familiar hum of the servers suddenly sounding alien. I swiped my keycard to enter the high-security lab. The reader blinked an angry final red. Denied. A cold dread, heavy as lead, settled in my gut. I tried my password on a nearby terminal. NIPE access denied. Account locked. It had taken them less than 5 minutes. "My name is Elias Vance. I'm 47, and for 22 years, Stratagem Defense has been my life's work. I designed the guidance core for the Odyssey V rocket that became the industry standard. My name is on 6 foundational patents that keep this company afloat. I wasn't just an employee, I was an architect of its legacy. They called me the old guard, the man who knew where all the digital bodies were buried because I helped build the cemetery. Now I was being digitally executed, severed from the very systems I created. Marcus thought he was just tying up a loose end. He was about to learn that this loose end still held the master blueprints. The walk from the lab to the front entrance was the longest of my life. Every eye I met, faces I'd known for years, people I'd mentored, darted away. Whispers followed me like a corrosive mist. They weren't seeing Elias Vance, the architect. They were seeing a ghost, a cautionary tale. The security guard at the main desk, a man I'd shared coffee with 1,000 times, couldn't even look at me as he took my badge. He just slid a cardboard box across the counter. My personal effects. 22 years, reduced to a box of cold coffee mugs and framed photos. This wasn't Stratagem. Not the company Arthur Sterling built. Arthur was a titan, an engineer's engineer who believed in building things that lasted, from rocket engines to relationships. He'd hired me right out of college, saw something in the quiet kid who preferred schematics to small talk. "The code is the truth, Elias," he told me once, his hand on my shoulder as we watched the Odyssey V leave the launch pad. "It doesn't play politics, it doesn't have an ego. Be like the code." But Arthur retired 5 years ago, and the new board cared more about stock prices than steel integrity. They brought in a new breed of executive, men like Marcus Thorne. Thorne didn't build, he conquered. He rose through the ranks by cannibalizing smaller departments, absorbing their budgets and their best ideas, then claiming the victories as his own. He built a faction, a company within the company, loyal only to him. Anyone who stood for the old ways, for Sterling's vision of a unified stratagem, was labeled a relic. Untrustworthy. Project Chimera was my final stand against his rot. It wasn't just another project. It was our future. A hybrid propulsion system based on a theoretical design Sterling and I had sketched on a napkin a decade ago. It was elegant, revolutionary, and so complex that only a handful of us truly understood its core. It was the one thing Thorne couldn't just absorb. He had to steal it. He needed my team, my data, and my blessing. He got none of them. Driving away from the Seattle campus, the city lights blurring through the rain on my windshield, I felt the cold dread finally burn away, replaced by a crystalline clarity. Thorne thought he'd cut me out. He'd only severed my restraints. He, and the board who enabled him, had forgotten the most important lesson Arthur Sterling ever taught me. When you're the architect, you don't just build the main halls and the grand entrances. You also build the maintenance tunnels, The emergency overrides, the hidden doors that no one else knows exist. They thought they locked me out of my house. I was about to show them I still had the keys to the foundation. My home office felt like a museum of a dead man's career. The box from my desk sat in the corner, a sad little tombstone. My work phone, now a useless brick of glass and metal, lay on the desk. Then, my personal laptop pinged. It was the company-wide memo. The subject line was sterile. Organizational update. The body was a masterpiece of corporate assassination, penned by Thorne's HR puppets. It didn't mention my name, but it didn't have to. It spoke of a necessary restructuring within the Advanced Propulsion Division to streamline innovation. It thanked a departing senior engineer for his years of service, but cited a, quote, fundamental misalignment with the company's forward-looking strategic directives. Misalignment, that was the word they used for integrity. I was no longer a person. I was a rounding error in a spreadsheet, a problem that had been solved. I scrolled through the contacts on my personal phone. 20 years of names. Mentors, mentees, colleagues I'd shared births and funerals with. I sent a few tentative texts. The replies were a deafening silence. I had been declared contagious, and no one wanted to risk infection. Then, one message broke through. It was from Anya Sharma, a brilliant junior coder I'd taken under my wing. Elias, what the hell happened? No one believes this. Misalignment. Garbage. Are you okay? A knot of fear tightened in my chest. Not for me, but for her. Her loyalty was a liability in Thorne's new stratagem. I typed back, my fingers clumsy. Anya, stay out of it, keep your head down, please. Her reply was instant. Too late. I asked questions in the team meeting. Thorne was there. He just smiled. An hour later, another text came. This one, from an old contact in a different department. It was a screenshot of an internal transfer order. Anya Sharma had been reassigned. Her new job, verifying legacy code on a satellite system scheduled for decommissioning in 3 months. It wasn't just a dead end. It was a burial plot. Thorne hadn't just fired me. He was salting the earth around anyone who ever stood with me. He was making an example of her. My refusal to break had cost a young, promising engineer her future. The final blow landed the next morning. A press release, forwarded to me by the same contact with a simple message. I'm sorry, Elias. Stratagem Defense was proud to announce the promotion of Marcus Thorne to Executive Vice President of the newly consolidated Advanced Propulsion Division. The release lauded his visionary leadership and his key role in, quote, fast-tracking the next generation of hybrid engine technology. Project Chimera was his now. He hadn't needed to steal my data. The board had just handed him the keys. The article even featured a quote from him. We honor the foundations of the past, but our focus must be on a bolder, more aggressive future. He was standing on my shoulders to get a better view of my grave. The anger wasn't hot anymore. It had cooled into something solid and heavy, like steel. I walked down to my basement. It wasn't just a man cave. It was my private lab. Banks of servers hummed quietly. A dedicated fiber line, paid for by me, snaked out of the wall. This was my personal network, my sandbox, where I stress-tested Stratagem's security protocols for fun. I had built their digital fortress, so I knew all the secret passages I'd built for myself. Thorne's memo called me misaligned. He was right. I was no longer aligned with their rules. I sat down, the glow of a terminal illuminating my face. It was time to remind them that the man who builds the house also knows exactly which walls are load-bearing, and I was about to start swinging a sledgehammer. But a sledgehammer is a clumsy tool. It's loud, messy, and leaves too much evidence. I was an engineer. I dealt in precision. My hands moved over the keyboard with a muscle memory that 22 years had burned into my nerves. I wasn't launching an attack. I was performing a system diagnostic. I keyed in a command string that hadn't been used in over a decade. It was a failsafe I'd built into the network's core architecture, a ghost protocol I called dataless. It was designed to grant an administrator root access from outside the firewall in the event of a catastrophic system collapse. It was a key only I held, for a door only I knew existed. The screen flickered, and a single, unadorned command prompt blinked back at me. No fanfare, no security alerts. To the rest of the network, I didn't exist. I was a whisper in the machine. From this vantage point, I could see everything. Internal emails, server logs, Project Chimera's data already being migrated to servers controlled by Thorne's department, its security protocols systematically stripped away for easier access by his unqualified team. It was like watching barbarians dismantle a cathedral to build a campfire. Then I found Anya. Her terminal was active, running a monotonous diagnostic on the K-12 satellite's telemetry code, a relic from the late 90s. It was busy work, designed to crush a spirit. But the code she was verifying, I knew it intimately. I'd written most of it myself, back when I was her age. My fingers flew across the keys again. I couldn't email her. I couldn't text. But I could speak to her through the work itself. I accessed the source file she was reviewing and added a single comment line, buried deep in a subroutine. It was a message no system admin would ever notice. //A. Sterling always said the code is the truth. Check syntax online 1998. It was the year I was hired. I knew she'd see it. On that line, I typed another comment, a string of hexadecimal code that would look like a memory address error. But Anya was brilliant. She would recognize it for what it was, a one-time encrypted link to a secure chat channel outside Stratagem's walls. A lifeline. My last act before dissolving back into the digital shadows was small, petty, and deeply satisfying. Thorne's entire department ran on a synchronized project management server. A single command from my ghost prompt desynchronized the server's internal clock with the network time protocol by a mere 700 milliseconds. It was nothing. A rounding error. But in the world of high-frequency data transfers and encrypted handshakes, 700 milliseconds was an eternity. It would create a cascade of phantom errors. Data packets would arrive out of order. Timestamps would fail verification. His entire department's workflow would be plagued by 1,000 tiny, maddening, untraceable glitches. They'd think it was a hardware issue. They would spend weeks, maybe months, chasing ghosts. They had no idea the ghost was real. I closed the connection and closed my command prompt, slipping back into the digital silence. For the next 48 hours, I was a ghost watching a plague unfold. The 700 millisecond delay was a masterpiece of subtle destruction. It was too small to trigger major system alarms, but large enough to make every high-level function fail unpredictably. Project timelines on Thorne's management software wouldn't sync. Encrypted communications between his teams would time out mid-handshake. Accessing the central data repository became a game of chance. From the logs, I could see the panic. Thorne's hand-picked team of innovators were flailing. They blamed solar flares, faulty server racks, network congestion. They were doctors trying to diagnose a disease by looking at the symptoms, completely oblivious to the single engineered virus causing the fever. Thorne, in an all-hands email I intercepted, called it, quote, unacceptable teething issues, and demanded his division heads work through the night to restore stability. They were chasing a shadow. My shadow. Late on the second night, a new window blinked into existence on my private server. It was a simple, unformatted text chat. The cursor pulsed once. Then, a message appeared. Backquote, 1998. I see you. What now? Backquote. Anya. My hands paused over the keyboard. Bringing her into this was a risk I hadn't wanted to take. But Thorne had already pushed her into the line of fire. Now, she was offering to fight back. Backquote. They're monitoring everything, Anya. This is dangerous. Backquote. The reply was instant. Backquote. So is being erased. They didn't just sideline me, Elias. They tried to bury me in that dead-end project. What do you need? Backquote. Her resolve solidified my own. The petty sabotage was satisfying, but it wouldn't stop Thorne. It wouldn't save Chimera. Thorne had built his entire reputation on being a visionary. a man who could deliver results where others couldn't. It was time to shatter that illusion on the biggest stage possible. Backquote. In 2 weeks, backquote, I typed, backquote is the quarterly investors' call, backquote. Backquote. Thorne's big debut as EVP, backquote, she replied. Backquote. He's been bragging for a week that he'll be doing a live demonstration of Chimera's new simulation data, backquote. Of course he was. Hubris was his primary operating system, backquote. He can't run a real simulation, backquote, I typed. Backquote. His team doesn't have the expertise to calibrate the core physics engine. They'll use the preliminary dataset I compiled. It's stable, predictable. He'll present my old work as his new progress, backquote. Backquote. So it will work flawlessly, backquote. Anya wrote back and I could almost hear the disappointment in her words. Backquote. It will appear to, backquote, I corrected, backquote. But they are not just using my data. They are using my simulation environment. And I built that environment with a few quirks, backquote. This was the strategic move. A sledgehammer just breaks things. A scalpel can sever a nerve, leaving the body intact but paralyzed. I wasn't going to destroy Project Chimera. I was going to make it obey only its true master. I explained the plan. Thorne's team would be running the simulation in what they thought was a closed system. But I still held the architect's key. I could access the root physics engine that governed the simulation. I couldn't just insert a virus. Their security scans, while incompetent, might catch that. I had to do something more elegant. I had to change the laws of physics themselves, but only inside their demonstration. Backquote. I'm going to introduce a single, flawed equation into the core calculus of the simulation, backquote, I wrote. Backquote. On its own, it's benign. It will pass every diagnostic they run. But when it interacts with the specific fuel-to-thrust ratio and atmospheric entry angle he plans to showcase, it will create a feedback loop. A catastrophic, undeniable failure, backquote. Backquote. How do you know which parameters he'll use? Backquote, Anya asked. Backquote, I don't, backquote, I admitted. Backquote, that's what I need from you, backquote. The silence on the chat stretched for a full minute. I was asking her to commit corporate espionage, not for personal gain, but for a principle. It was a career-ending request if she was caught. Then, the reply came. Backquote. The final presentation parameters are locked in a secure project file on the local server. He reviews them every morning. I'll get them. Backquote. Backquote. Anya, if they trace it back, backquote. Backquote. Let them try. They think I'm just a code monkey staring at dead satellites. They won't even be looking at me. Backquote. Over the next week, while Thorne's department descended into a state of low-grade panic over their phantom network errors, Anya and I worked in the digital shadows. She was my eyes and ears, feeding me information about their frantic, clumsy attempts to prep the Chimera data. They were treating my work like a black box, terrified to alter any of the core components, focusing only on the graphical interface for the presentation. They were polishing the chrome on a car while I was loosening the bolts on the engine. Finally, 3 days before the investor's call, Anya sent the prize, a single data file containing the exact sequence and parameters for Thorne's live demonstration. His grand moment. I went to work. I wasn't a hacker planting a bomb. I was a watchmaker adding a microscopic flaw to a single gear. I located the target data packet, the one they would load for the live demo, and using my dataless protocol, I injected my Trojan horse. It wasn't malware. It was a single, elegant line of code I called Sterling's Constant. It was a tribute to Arthur, a piece of logic so fundamentally twisted it would appear correct to any automated check. It redefined a single aerodynamic stress value, tying it exponentially to the engine's heat output. In any normal test, the effect was negligible. But under the sustained high-yield burn Thorne planned to show off, my constant would turn a stable engine simulation into a runaway atomic reaction. I watched the log files as one of Thorne's junior engineers, following a checklist, ingested my altered data packet into the final presentation build. They ran their diagnostics. Green lights across the board. The system reported 100% integrity. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Marcus Thorne was about to step onto a global stage, beaming with pride, ready to present his stolen vision of the future. He had no idea he was about to press the launch button on the most spectacular failure in Stratagem's history, and I, the ghost in the machine, had already written the flight plan. The day of the quarterly investors' call arrived with the cold, gray indifference of a Seattle morning. In my basement, I wasn't just watching the public webcast. Anya had routed me a direct feed from the presentation server itself. I had a split screen. On the left, the polished corporate stream of Marcus Thorne at the podium. On the right, the raw telemetry and system diagnostic data pouring from the simulation rig. From my worn office chair, I had a better view than the board of directors in the front row. Thorne stepped onto the stage, bathed in a confident blue spotlight. He looked every bit the visionary EVP, his suit sharp, his smile calibrated for maximum shareholder value. "Good morning," he began, his voice smooth as polished granite. "Today we're not just talking about the future of Stratagem. We're going to show it to you." He spoke of agility, of synergy, of a new paradigm, weaving a narrative where he was the savior who had rescued Project Chimera from the dusty, inefficient hands of the past. My hands. I felt a cold calm settle over me. He was a conductor about to lead an orchestra, blissfully unaware I had rewritten his triumphant symphony into a funeral dirge. "Let's not waste time with slides," Thorne said with a theatrical flourish. "Let's see Chimera in action." The massive screen behind him lit up with a stunning 3D rendering of the hybrid engine, my design, floating in the blackness of space. The telemetry data on my feed began to scroll. A river of green, nominal values. Anya's chat window popped up on a third monitor. Backquote. "He's using my graphical overlay. The arrogant fool." Backquote. I typed a quick reply. Backquote. "It'll make the failure look prettier." Backquote. Thorne's voice guided the investors through the initial burn phase. As you can see, perfect stability, exceeding all previous efficiency benchmarks. The engine on screen glowed with a soft, controlled power. The simulation was flawless. For a moment, watching the elegant dance of numbers I had orchestrated, a pang of regret hit me. I was about to destroy my own beautiful creation. But then I looked at Thorne's smug face, and the feeling vanished. This wasn't destruction. It was a course correction. "And now," Thorne announced, his voice swelling with pride, "the moment we've all been waiting for. We will now simulate a sustained, high-yield atmospheric entry burn. This is the maneuver that will redefine aerospace engineering." He tapped a key on his console. On my screen, the data streams surged. The core temperature climbed. The thrust output multiplied. This was the trigger. Stirling's constant, my dormant line of code, woke up. It started small. A single value in the aerodynamic stress column flickered from green to yellow. No one on Thorne's team would notice. It was within acceptable tolerance, but it was the beginning of the feedback loop. The rising temperature, amplified by my flawed equation, began to report exponentially higher stress loads. The stress loads, in turn, told the simulation the engine's containment field was weakening, which made the core heat skyrocket. On the main screen, the engine's beautiful blue glow began to flicker with veins of angry red. Thorne paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "A minor graphical anomaly as the system handles the extreme data load," he said, forcing a confident tone. But it wasn't minor. The red veins spread, cracking across the engine's casing like shattered glass. The clean hum of the simulation was replaced by a rising, distorted shriek from the auditorium speakers. On my telemetry feed, every single value was now screaming red. Alarms no one but me could see were flashing across my screen. Containment failure. Thermal runaway. Catastrophic core breach. The simulation didn't just fail, It committed spectacular high-definition suicide. The engine on the screen convulsed, then erupted in a silent, blinding flash of white light, consuming the entire frame. When the light faded, all that remained was a cloud of digital debris against the cold backdrop of space. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. Thorne stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. The confident visionary had vanished, replaced by a man watching his own public execution. "Run it again," he snapped into his microphone, his voice tight with panic. "There's a bug in the presentation software." But it was too late. On a small window in the corner of my monitor, I watched the live stock ticker for Stratagem Defense. The green line had hit a cliff. It wasn't just falling, it was plummeting. He hadn't just lost face. He'd vaporized billions in shareholder value in less than 90 seconds. The code, as Arthur Sterling always said, was the truth. And I had just made Marcus Thorne's entire career a lie. He jabbed a finger at his tech crew, off stage, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. They were just stagehands. The real director was miles away, sitting in the dark, watching the final act. The webcast feed cut to a generic Stratagem logo. The silence was more damning than any explosion. On my third monitor, Anya's message appeared, backquote. "They're escorting him off the stage. The board looks like they've seen a ghost," backquote. My ghost, I thought. My work phone, the brick I'd kept on my desk, suddenly vibrated. It was a feature I'd built into the executive directory, a priority override for board-level emergencies. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker. The voice was ragged, stripped of its polished granite facade. It was pure, raw fury. "Vance, you son of a bitch, what did you do?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, Marcus," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I'm just a misaligned, departing senior engineer, remember? Don't play games with me, my career is over, the stock is in free fall." "Your career was built on a lie," I replied, the words sharp and precise as a laser. "You presented my work as your own, without understanding an ounce of it. You thought Chimera was just data you could own, but it has integrity, it has rules. A system doesn't tolerate a leader who can't speak its language." I could hear him breathing, a harsh, desperate sound. "I will find proof. I will ruin you." "You won't find anything," I said, leaning back in my chair. "There's no virus, no malware, just a single, elegant, mathematical constant that revealed the truth. A system check for integrity. You failed. You called me untrustworthy because I wouldn't help you cannibalize this company. My loyalty was to the work, to the legacy Arthur Sterling built. You tried to bury Anya Sharma for the same reason. This wasn't just about me, Marcus. It was about all the people you trampled on your way up." A long silence stretched. He had nothing. "They'll need a scapegoat, Marcus," I finished, my voice dropping to a whisper. "And the man holding the detonator when the bomb goes off is usually the first one they blame. Goodbye." I ended the call before he could reply, severing the connection. It was over. He hadn't been defeated by a hacker. He'd been undone by an architect, in a house he never understood. So here's the real question. Where does loyalty at work truly belong? With the coworkers you're in the trenches with every day, or with the company as a whole? Let me know what you think in the comments.